So let's start with your name.
It's still Jack Frost.
What year were you born?
1947.
And how long have you lived in North Baltimore?
Well, except for a few years in Florida since 1947.
Why did you move to North Baltimore?
Well, we didn't actually move here. This is where I started at. We moved to Florida for my father's health. Because in those days, they didn't have blood thinner. Doctor told him when he had heart trouble, you don't move to a warmer climate, you're not going to live. So we moved to Florida for 6 years maybe, 7 years. And then we came back.
And what keeps you in North Baltimore now?
Business and family. And it's home.
So you went to school here?
Oh yeah.
How was the school different back when you went to school?
As opposed to now?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't go to school now. But I would say the discipline was much better when I went. Kids nowadays don't seem to have the respect for other things and other people that they did when I was there. And one of the things, for example, that I've read about this in the paper for years, you do something wrong at school, you get in trouble, and the parents go give the teachers a bad time. When I was in school, if you got in trouble at school, you were really going to get it when you got home, because they were going to let your parents know that you screwed up. I had one friend that I'm still friends with, he was grounded one whole summer.
Wow.
Yeah, he was allowed to come off grounding when football practice started.
What kind of trends were popular in your youth?
Oh boy. I don't really recall much trendy things in those days when I was young. We got into rock and roll obviously in the early 60s when the Beatles broke onto the scene. Prior to that it was more of a southern rock thing. And then the English invasion or British invasion, whatever you want to call it. And that was probably considered a trend. And after that, it was just a bunch of minor things like bell-bottom pants for a while, paisley shirts, that sort of thing.
What did you do for fun when you were?
Tried to stay out of trouble. Me and most people were my friends, we played sports. If school was out, we played sports anyway. We had sandlot, baseball, football, all that stuff. And other than that, I mean, you go to the library. We didn't have all the stuff we have now. We didn't have internet. So you had no information. You wanted information, you went to the library. So if everybody had a library card, you go to the library. And sports, about it.
What kind of stories were you told when you were a child?
I was basically told historic stories of this town. And obviously that's because we lived here. For example, my family ended up here because my grandfather was a wildcat oil driller. So this would have been the oil boom right around the turn of the century. So that's why they moved here originally. My dad was born here in 1905. And he was raised here, and then he went to Detroit for a while and came back after the war. He was in some supervisor of some plant in Toledo, excuse me, on one of the floors. And he kept trying to enlist in the service, and they wouldn't let him, and he found out why after the war. The supervisor, he was supervisor of was making parts for the Manhattan Project, which was the atom bomb. So they wouldn't let him enlist. Then he came back here, and he was interested in bowling, got into that when he was in Detroit, and he came back here and bought the existing bowling alley, which was a 3-lane, and then in 1946 he built the 10-pin, which is still standing.
And that's what you do? You run the bowling alley?
Yeah, I'm semi-retired now. My youngest son takes care of most of it. I've done it for a lot of years. I've worked some other jobs earlier on, primarily lately, mostly that. And I had some health issues now, starting in 2001, so I'm not allowed to do much. My son just doesn't let me. It's like, don't do that, I'm gonna do that. It's like, okay. So now he used to fall off the fence instead of me.
What were some of the other jobs that you did?
Oh, let's see. Right out of high school, I got hired at France Stone Quarry, driving a dump truck down in the pit. When that closed down, I didn't care to say closed down because it didn't do that. It slowed down for the winter. I went to work at a place in Macomb called Crust Proof Tubing, rubber plant. And I also worked for the France Stone Company in Waterville. Got transferred up there once. I worked construction. I worked for a pipeline maintenance company. I built farm ponds. I've done roofing and remodeling, that sort of thing when I was younger. I worked concrete construction, which you don't want to do when you're older, that's tough. Because then we had to shovel it all. And that pretty much covers it. I can go do everything there. Probably the jack of all trades, master of none thing. Also, when I was young, like 15, 16, I hung around the body shop, so I actually can do a little body work on car if I want to. So, like I said, just a little bit of everything.
That's pretty cool.
Well, a lot of people my age did that stuff. We could do a lot of different things because if you couldn't, it didn't get done.
So what major historical events have you lived through?
Landing on the moon, that would be major. Kennedy assassination, everybody remembers where they were when that happened. I was in the library in 8th grade at school. Let's see, what else do we have? Well, obviously any of the complex of wars since then, but I think the moon landing and Kennedy were probably the two big ones of my youth. I mean, those were just like, wow, unheard of.
What big inventions came out? What were you
Computers.
into?
Computers, actually calculators even. When I was in grade school, there was no such thing as a calculator. And then by the time I made it to high school, calculators were available, but we weren't allowed to bring them to school.
Really?
Yeah. And of course now, when my kids started going to school, they had to have one to take to school. And of course, the first computer that we had was a Radio Shack Trash 80. And that's because that's what the kids had in school, and that's what my boys learned to do on. So that's what we had. And it was pretty much all that was available for a while, and it's like really archaic compared to today's stuff. We had the onset of video games for television to start out with Pong, which was really exciting. You've probably seen Pong in the history somewhere where the paddle moves up and down and the ball goes back and forth. You go to sleep doing that. And it just went on from there into the arcades and all the games that came that way and everything you've got now with PlayStation and stuff like that. So there's been a lot of stuff that's happened.
How has the world changed throughout your life?
Well, it's hard to say because I don't really think it's changed that much. The names change, but the same thing goes on. Like a lot of the Arab states have been trying to get Israel out of existence since they became in existence in 1947. And all it is the people change, they die off, the new one takes over, and it's the same goal. So you have that. Communism has always been what it is now, and they always want everything that they have, except some of the countries come and go from that. So as far as any real earth-shattering changes, nothing that I can say strikes me as being that important as opposed to what has happened in the past. It just seems to keep on going kind of in the same evolution over and over again.
Have you traveled out of the country?
Been to Canada, been to the Bahamas, and that's my out of the country.
How has North Baltimore changed?
Well, it's changed a lot, and the best way to probably try to explain to someone your age, when I was 16, 15, 14, 17, in that era there, North Baltimore was like the movie American Graffiti. Have you ever seen it? Rent it and look at it, or get it on YouTube or something. It's really the way things were in the 60s. A lot of hot cars cruising all the time. Gas was cheap. Everybody did it everywhere. Here, Findlay, BG, all the way around. Now, if you want to go back to when I was younger, like go teenage or before teenage, preteen, you've probably seen A Christmas Story.
Yeah.
Same thing. We had a hardware store down here, Davis Brothers Hardware, and it was just like the hardware store in Christmas Story. They put up a big Christmas display in the window, had Lionel trains, they had the Red Ryder BB gun, and all the other stuff. And it happened every year. All the grocery stores, food center was down in the corner, IGA was here, and where the Huntington Bank is, that was Word Supermarket. They all had Christmas trees lined up down the side of the wall, and you go buy your Christmas tree. There was no artificial trees. When you have a tree, you got a new one. Because they just didn't have artificial trees yet when I was young. And that stuff kind of all came in, probably in the mid-60s, but when I was in the 50s, I mean, it's like A Christmas Story. That's the way it was.
That sounds pretty cool.
It was fun to live in, it really was. Yeah, it really was, and I mean, I don't think I'd trade it. I think if I had to do it over again, I'd do it again, because it was good times. You didn't have any problems like you have now. where you always read about some idiot getting a gun and going to go shoot people for what reason? They don't even have one. When I was young, if somebody's mad at you, they picked a fight with you. I mean, you went out back and duked it out. That's the way it was. You didn't have to worry about somebody shooting you in the back when you weren't looking. And it's just, you solved your problems that way, and everybody did it the same way. Nobody even, we all had guns. We all rabbit hunted. We all had a 22 to go plinking with. And I don't think I ever heard anybody that I knew say in anger, I'm going to get my gun and shoot so-and-so. The thought never entered people's minds. And now it's like, boy, what do we got out there? A bunch of nuts? Perhaps. And where do you trace that problem back to? Lack of discipline, maybe? Could be.
What do you think North Baltimore will be like in, say, 20 years?
20 years is going to be similar to what it is now. I think it's changed about as much as it's going to for a while, unless something else changes around it, because there's a lot of businesses that aren't here anymore because you have the shopping centers, the Walmarts, the Myers, that sort of thing. When I was a kid, we didn't go out of town until we were going to the farm where my grandpa and grandma lived, over by Arcadia. You didn't go to Findlay for anything, you didn't go to Bowling Green for anything. Everything you needed was here. We had, let's see, over here we had an Polesville Pontiac dealership. We had a Chevy dealership, Ford dealership, Chrysler dealership, and a Nash dealership down here. Plus a gas station on every corner. And 3 big grocery stores and a produce market to be named. Clothing stores, furniture stores, shoe repair. You actually could go get your shoes fixed, and you could go buy shoes. And it's just everything that you wanted to buy was right here. So people just didn't go out of town. I mean, it was a big deal when we'd go to the farm. And it's not that far away. I mean, it was like halfway between Arcadia and Findlay. And it was a big deal because other than that, you didn't get out of town. There was at one time a railroad that went all the way to Toledo. It was called the Interurban. Went right down Main Street. And it was streetcars, like trolley cars.
Yeah.
And it went all the way through Findlay on to Lima, as I was told. And that was a lot of the people traveled that way when, probably a little bit before I was a kid. But for example, my grandmother never had a car or a driver's license. She died in 1964 at age of 94. Never had a driver's license, never had a car, didn't need one. She lived, where J.P. McLeod lives? The lot to this side of him, that's where her house was.
Okay.
So you've got the produce market and the grocery store half a block away. She didn't need a car. And there was a lot of people like her that just didn't have a car, they didn't need one. So, I don't know, I think where we're at now, it's probably going to stay kind of like this for a while. I know years ago they thought, like the Jetsons where everybody flying, everybody, that's not happening. First of all, it's too expensive, second of all, it's too dangerous, and they can't keep hitting each other with cars. Put them in the air, it's going to get worse.
What do you think the world will be like in 20 years?
That's really hard to say. I think it's not going to get destroyed like everybody's predicting that this country or whatever. I don't think that's going to happen. We've been with nuclear weapons pretty much as long as I've been alive. Okay, so that's 71 years. And we haven't blown ourselves up yet because everybody that has a nuclear weapon has enough sense to not use it. It's more of a deterrent. And unless the aliens show up and zap us, I really don't see any country putting enough nukes out to ruin the world to where you can't live on it. So I think it'll continue like it is. There'll be little squabbles and spats and things like that. And it'll be people wanting power and position that cause that a lot. But other than that, it's going to be relatively sane. There may be like countries you don't want to go to. And given the way things have been with the Arabs since 2001, I can't imagine why anyone wants to go on a vacation there. I mean, when they tell you that their religion demands that if you're not a Muslim, they kill you, that's not where I want to go visit. Like, they might decide to get real religious while I'm there. It's like, no, we don't need this. So, but I don't think it's going to change a lot in the near future. I think it's going to stay a lot like it is. There'll be, a little bit of change, but not going to be a lot. I think we've already been through that.
Okay. What are your personal hopes for the future?
We don't blow the world up. Oh, I don't really have any that I think of, because at my age, it's like, I don't have much to worry about, It's just, I'm not gonna be here that much longer, so it doesn't concern me too much. It's a live and let live thing in my mind, and I'm sure it's a lot that way in a lot of people's minds. So, yeah, but it's not gonna change it much, I don't think. If it does, it's not gonna be crazy.
Okay.
So that's good news for you and your
Yeah.
generation, as long as you don't eat Tide Pods. You knew that was coming sooner or later, didn't you? Like, when I was a kid, you never heard of anything like that happening.
Yeah.
So nowadays, it's like, what are they thinking? I mean, why would you even do that?
Right. Is there anything else you want to say?
We've covered a lot, unless you've got some questions you want to ask besides now.
I think that's everything that I have.
Yeah, it's been interesting being here, and like I said, I don't think I'd trade it for anything. If I had to do over, I'd do it the same way. There's been a lot of good times, there have been a few bad times, but that's life, that's the way it's going to be. Things don't always go the way you'd like them to go.